The fraud case in Minnesota just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger to the point where now politicians can't ignore it. And that is mainly due to Nick Shirley and his videos. And his video on it, which got 130 million views on X. It blew up. And it actually ended Tim Walz's career. In fact, it was acknowledged by Tim Shirley himself that he did end his career because without this, Tim Walz would have continued to run in the Minnesota governor's race as they don't have term limits there. So Nick Shirley, a small YouTuber, ended up ending a career politician's career. That is insane. But it wasn't just him. It was Tim Walz himself that ended it. And his incompetency and his negligence or even being complicit in this fraud that resulted in his failure. So let's actually watch the video of him talking about resigning and not resigning, but dropping out of the governor's race for Minnesota.
Well, good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. Like many Minnesotans, I have to tell you, I was glad to turn the page on 2025. It was an extraordinarily difficult year for our state, and it ended on a particularly sour note. For the last several years, an organized group of criminals have sought to take advantage of this state's generosity. And even as we make progress in the fight against the fraudsters, we now see an organized group of political actors seeking to take advantage of a crisis.
No, it's not organized political actors. We're just reporting on fraud that was in your own state. In his own state. In Tim Walz's own state, they're just reporting on that. It's not political actors. If it was, you would have been solving this yourself. Also, it was... You said in this, you said that it was already being solved. No, it wasn't. A lot of those daycares that Tim Shirley showed are still in operation and still receiving funding, and none of those people have been arrested. So Tim Walz has not been solving the issue, and it's not on the way to being solved. So it's obvious here that it's not political actors, and it's not on the way to being solved. So Tim Walz, no. You're spouting false facts.
I don't want to mince words here. Donald Trump and his allies in Washington and in St. Paul and online want to make our state a colder, meaner place. They want to poison our people against each other by attacking our...
You said colder and meaner place. No, it wasn't Trump that did that. Tim Walz did it simply because he didn't actually solve the fraud issue. Plus, it's good that we're a colder and meaner to people that are committing actual crimes. When you're colder and meaner to those people, guess what? They're not going to do those crimes because they're more likely to be punished. They're more likely to face actual punishment like going to jail, being deported. That's another thing. Being deported or facing major financial issues like from massive fines. So you actually do want to be colder and meaner to those people. And if anyone's at fault, it's Tim Walz for the fact that he let this go on large enough to now where it's a structural issue in Minnesota. Additionally, it's probably not just there, but it's everywhere. That is actually not actually enforcing the rules on this. So it's not, if anyone that made it more colder and meaner, it's Tim Walz himself by the fact that he didn't actually prosecute what was necessary.
Neighbors. And ultimately, they want to take away much of what makes Minnesota the best place in the country to raise a family. Republicans are playing politics with the future of this state. It's shameful. And I've said it before, and I will continue to say it. We welcome ideas from anyone, in any party, from any walk of life.
No. Democrats clearly don't do that. They they championed deplatforming. They championed cancellations of people online. It was the Biden administration that tried to do censorship and actually, according to the Twitter files and what was going on, according to Facebook, Google, they got pressured by the Democrat FBI to censor people online. So clearly you're not the party, you're not the state that supports freedom of expression and freedom of sharing ideas. So no, Tim Walz, that's utterly false.
Who wants to help us continue to stay ahead of these criminals. And we welcome the involvement of the federal government. I am grateful.
No, you don't. You've been slamming ICE. You've been trying to stop ICE from removing illegal immigrants. You've clearly stand against Donald Trump, and you can stand against his ideas, but you've done actions previously to try to limit U.S. federal involvement in the state. So no, Tim Walz. That's, again, factually false.
To the career professionals at the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI who have been helping us fight this fight for years. But I cannot abide the actions of the political leadership in Washington. These opportunists are willing to hurt our people to score cheap points. They and their allies have no intention of helping us solve this problem.
Of course they do. They want to see the end of the fraud. In fact, I bet that's going to be another major thing in the campaign for a lot of these Republican people in Democrat states in the midterms. That's probably going to be a lot of it. So yes, they want to end it because then they get the benefit of actually stopping the fraud, and they can say they can actually solve the issue. So no, they clearly want to solve this, or else they lose voters. So because yeah, it's not just it's the utter incompetency from this man and the utter lying in this entire speech that's obvious to anyone that's been paying attention.
And every intention of trying to profit off of it. Which brings me to this. 2026 is an election year. Election years have a way of ramping up the politics at a time when we simply can't afford more of that in Minnesota. In September, I announced that I would seek a historic third term as Minnesota's governor. And I have every confidence that if I gave it my all, we would win the race.
Probably not. It's obvious that once you've dropped in the polls, with this fraud scandal, everyone sees the incompetency and the corruption. So I bet, actually, if you would have run, you would have lost. And I bet that's actually why Tim Walz ended up dropping out here. Because he got pressure from other people in the Democrat Party that realized if he does run again, they're going to lose the governor, the Senate, and the Senate seat that go up in Minnesota, and House seats to the Republican Party. Additionally, they might lose the AG position, which actually I think that one they'll probably lose anyways because of Keith Ellison's corruption there, and we'll talk about that later. But this is obviously it was obvious that he would have lost. He could have also been primary too, but him dropping out is not to make politics less extreme. No, he's doing it to save his own ass.
But as I reflect on this moment with my family and my team over the holidays, I came to the conclusion that I can't give a political campaign my all. Every minute that I spend defending my own political interest would be a minute I can't spend defending the people of Minnesota.
That's true.
Against the criminals who prey on our generosity and the cynics who want to prey on our differences. So I've decided to step out of this race, and I'll let others worry about the election while I focus on the work that's in front of me for the next year.
Well, he's going to be focusing on the work. You know what he's going to be focusing on. He's going to be focusing on saving himself. It's obvious that he's going to try to cover up the corruption as much as possible, try to deny it and slow down investigations. That is what's most likely going to happen. That's what you see in these types of situations from people in power. You see it with what happened in Watergate. Obviously, the Nixon administration tried to slow down the investigation. So when all these things happen, it is obvious that he's going to try to, instead of focusing on actually helping the people, he's going to try to get himself out of this. So glad he's dropping out. Hopefully we actually get him, and I think he will. So what does this mean for other people in the state besides Tim Walz? So first of all, you'll see probably a lot of competition for the Democrat primary within the state for governor. You'll probably see I forgot the name, the senator. You'll probably see Keith Ellison. You'll probably see the senator for the state trying to win the primary. But you'll see probably a lot of competition there, and and that's probably going to slow them down, and it's going to slow down them. But this also gives a major chance for Republicans too. Due to the fraud scandal and Tim Walz dropping out, Republicans do kind of have a head start in the state. There's going to be less infighting because now because it's not going to be as chaotic as dropping out, the major candidate dropping out right now. So Republicans will have a head start there. Additionally, if we actually put up someone good, there will be less incumbency bias, first of all. Second of all, if Republicans do win the governor's race, they could actually come in and clean the stuff up. And hopefully they do. Now, let's actually look at some of the corruption of other members of the administration under Tim Walz. So first is Keith Ellison. So this is a video here explaining how he actually received campaign finances, campaign donations from the Feeding Our Future fraud and other Somali daycares in Minnesota.
First voice heard on the recording is Salim Saeed, who just last month was convicted on 21 felony counts in federal court. 9 days after the recording was made, Keith Ellison and his Minneapolis City Council member son Jeremiah together received around $20,000 in campaign cash from some of the meeting attendees and other related parties. In a statement...
So $20,000 went directly to Keith Ellison. Now, if you don't know, Keith Ellison is the Attorney General for Minnesota. Basically the person in charge of all the prosecutions and the Department of Justice for that state. So, the fact that he actually was aware and actually met with the person from Feeding Our Future, and at that point, the person from Feeding Our Future clearly shows that there's some level of corruption there, as he wouldn't actually be talking, he wouldn't actually be the one, he wouldn't be meeting with someone, and the person in charge of Feeding Our Future wouldn't actually be giving him campaign donations unless they got something out of Keith Ellison. So it's kind of obvious that there's corruption here. Additionally, it wasn't just Saeed for the person in charge of Feeding Our Future, but it was other people too. So let's look at that.
Issue to Fox 9, Keith Ellison claims that the meeting was organized by Mohammed Omar, a man not indicted in the fraud case. Also attending the meeting was Ikram Muhammad, who is awaiting trial in federal court. Both Saeed, Ikram, and Omar were donors to Jeremiah Ellison's campaign. Jeremiah is seen in this Election Day photo from 2021, taken by his father Keith.
So yeah, he actually met with people. He's actually has a picture of it. He's received donations from all three of those people that are indicted for fraud. So all these people have obviously been donating to a campaign. And why would they donate to a campaign? It's obvious to get to get people in power to ignore the cases of their fraud. So it's obvious that's what's happening here. And this will continue to happen unless Keith Ellison actually gets convicted. And I hope Trump does actually come in and try to arrest both Walz, Ellison, and probably Ilhan Omar with this. Because she also received campaign donations from the Feeding Our Future too. So I hope all of these people actually get at least prosecuted so they can actually get a trial, first of all, because they do need a trial. But arrest them in some way, indict them, just like how they indicted him in those bogus cases in both New York, Florida, and yeah, do what they did to you. Turnaround is fair play. So Trump should really come in and try to arrest these people for corruption. It's obviously there. And if it's not, then just if it's not there, and then just have that come out at trial. So it's obvious. It's obvious, the obvious corruption here. So that is what Trump needs to do. And it's additionally corruption here, it's not just at the state level, and it's not just high level people that are have possible corruption and are actually letting people off that have clear fraud. Because here's another case of an actual judge letting someone off of fraud when they were already convicted. So let's watch the video.
The $7.2 million mailbox. That's how prosecutors described to the jury of Promise Health LLC, the home health care company owned by Abdi Fattah Yusuf on Central Avenue in Minneapolis, where several other similar businesses were supposedly located. Jurors saw dozens of checks written to Yusuf's wife and family members, and $1.1 million in bank transfers and cash withdrawals to him.
So the fraud is obvious. Again, there's actual financial evidence. There's plenty of checks of people that have their own signatures on there. So it's obvious that they're committing, that they're linked to it.
Money Promise Health received through state Medicaid reimbursements for claiming to provide personal care assistant or PCA services. The jury saw it as fraud and convicted Yusuf of 6 counts of theft by swindle.
It was not a difficult decision whatsoever. The deliberation took probably 4 hours at most. Based off of the state's evidence that was presented, I was beyond a reasonable doubt.
What the jury didn't know.
Yeah, 4 hours is actually pretty short for a jury deliberation, especially when you're dealing with financial crimes and stuff related to that. So yeah, it's a short deliberation beyond any reasonable doubt, as again he showed the other ones there, and also convicted by the jury.
Is that before they deliberated, Judge Sarah West tossed out the top charge of racketeering. Then 3 months after the verdict, Judge West made the rare move of tossing out the full verdict as well, giving Yusuf...
This judge right here, what was her name again?
The full verdict as well, giving Yusuf West made charge of racketeering. Judge Sarah West tossed...
Judge Sarah West obviously has at some level benefiting the criminal here. Again, convicted beyond a reasonable doubt by the jury. That is what justice does. Judges don't get to overrule, or shouldn't get to overrule, because that is, at that point, it's obvious that there's fraud, and it's obvious. So this judge right here does need to be held accountable for actually letting someone off that was utterly obvious. It was obvious. Jury said it. There was actual evidence. You just showed the checks. It's completely obvious that the person committed fraud, and the judge just threw it out. This judge needs to be held accountable. That is one of the things in our system that I do not like right now. Judges like this can't be held accountable. What we need to do is actually have some sort of punishment for judges like this, be it financial, be it jail time, or maybe just removing them from a bench. But judges that clearly try to benefit the criminal when they've been arrested, they've had the trial, jury convicted, under all those cases, the judge does need to be held accountable. And you can do this through, I'm saying, maybe a fine for judges that clearly let someone off like this. And that would solve this issue, because that makes the incentive to actually commit cases like this. It makes it more likely that they're going to be anti-defendant and more likely to actually follow the rules and not just let someone off like this. So that is a simple thing. Additionally, you could do this for not just this fraud case, but you can also do it, for example, not just this case, but you can do it for cases where you get people that have committed multiple felonies that have been released over and over and over again. You saw this with the person that committed the violence in Seattle, where he hit an old lady taking out her eye with a board. You see it with the killing of Irina Ruska in the subway. And then the one in Chicago, where a man with 72 convictions ended up lighting someone on fire. All of these are cases where judges have done something to let the criminal off when they clearly are a problem and clearly have committed crimes, and it's resulted in harm to the people of the state. So, you need to have punishment like this, and that is the most basic incentive for judges to actually follow rules like this, instead of being activist judges.
Tossing out the full verdict as well, giving Yusuf a judgment of acquittal. Court records show other Hennepin County judges tossing related cases before they reached trial. Judge Amber Brennan dismissed the charges against Yusuf's wife, Lol Ahmed, and Judge Hillary Caligiuri dismissed charges against co-defendant.
So all those judges, not just her and the first judge, but Judge
Related cases before they reached trial. Judge Amber Brennan dismissed charges against Yusuf's wife, Lol Ahmed, and Judge Hillary Caligiuri dismissed charges against co-defendant Abdiweli Mahamoud.
What we need is for all these judges to be held accountable. Since again, it's also showing a pattern there. 3 separate judges doing stuff that is clearly letting off people that have committed fraud. All of these judges need to be held accountable for what's going on. It is the most basic thing. Or have a system where they get fined for letting people off that have clearly had past conviction that clearly let people off that are clearly committing crimes and overturn guilty verdicts like this. That is the most basic thing to do. So, having punishments for all of these levels, the governor, the AG, even for judges, having punishments for committing these crimes is the most basic way to limit these incentives for this. Because then they're less likely to actually commit and do those actions, as they'll cause them actual harm. So that is the most basic thing to do. Additionally, it's not just Minnesota here. It's these cases with the AG in Minnesota. It's not just Tim Walz. It's not just Minnesota as a whole. It's not just these judges, but there's actually cases in other states. So let's look at this case where it's an actual case in Washington, where roughly 80% of all publicly disclosed Washington campaign donations made in 2025 by people with childcare listed as their occupation went to Somali Port of Seattle Commissioner Hamdi Muhammad. That is a massive amount of money just going to one person, and that's all the money that's for daycare. 80% of daycare is going to one person, and it's just a city commissioner. And that's in all of Washington. Washington campaign donations made with people with childcare. So again, this is more likely to be corruption again. Although I do not know, there has to be an actual investigation. There's this case here, and it's not just here. There's also the stuff in Ohio, where there's a lot of cases there. But the biggest person of all, and the biggest state of all, is probably California. California is the biggest state in terms of economic in terms of GDP in the entire U.S. Also, it is the state with the most spending out of any state. So it makes sense why they would have a lot of money going into the system. And that means that there's a even larger chance of fraud. Just look at this. Under Gavin Newsom's watch, California state agencies saw $76 billion in waste and fraud, $18 billion on a failed rail with 0 tracks made. If there were 0 tracks, where did all that money go? Did it go for planning? If it did, why was it that much to cost for just simply planning it? $24 billion for homeless, and they lost track of the funds. $24 billion. Again, all that money's going missing. It's even bigger than the case in Minnesota. In fact, it's even bigger than the total of $18 billion spent in Minnesota over the last 8 years. 8 years in Minnesota federally. $24 billion. That's massive. $32 billion in COVID unemployment insurance fraud. Again, all that money there, that's massive amount of money. 650 million wasted on new 911 system that they never 911 system they never used because the technology did not work. Again, if that much money is spent, that is reckless spending, negligence, and likely fraud. Billions in welfare frauds. Time for the feds to step up, don't you think? Yes. The feds do need to come in and arrest the people that are wasting this much money and wasting so much money. All this could go for way more efficient systems. So Gavin Newsom. Additionally, this is probably not the entire thing because we haven't even mentioned daycare fraud there. They have similar daycare programs to Minnesota. It's not mentioning Medicare, Medicaid. All these examples right there could result in even more fraud. So it's not just Minnesota. It's in plenty of blue states. As again, I mentioned earlier, the fraud in, likely fraud in Washington. So all these examples are things where major politicians are clearly corrupt. They need to be held accountable held accountable as best as possible. Arrest them, put them on trial, and then see if they have evidence. Additionally, another thing, for negligence like this, you could actually add a law on the books that's saying negligence, like wasting this much money, could also be a prosecutable offense. It's not as big as like the corruption charges. It's not going to be as expensive there, but maybe a fine that will make the people in politics and running these places even more accountable. Additionally, that is the most basic thing. Additionally, we should also incentivize, so this doesn't happen in the future, we should incentivize independent reporters and people reporting stuff to the actual police. So maybe do a bounty system on if you catch so much of a certain amount of fraud and you report it to the police, and they actually catch the person and arrested and the allegations are proven to be true, then you get a certain amount of money, a certain percentage of the fraud that would have been saved. Because then you're actually saving money and you're actually incentivizing people to actually go out and solve this fraud. Now, the only issue there would be overzealous people actually reporting stuff and that isn't actually happen. But guess what? We could also put a small cost or small fine on false reporting. You can do that. In fact, I think we should do that for a lot of these cases within the court system. If you have a false report and it's been proven to be false, then you're having a small fine. Just like having let's say, you can do this with pretty much any case. If you falsely report rape or falsely report murder or falsely report anything, that would also be a way to disincentivize people from doing false reporting. So, it makes sure that there's an actual higher level evidence to it, because they could lose stuff if they false report. And it also incentivizes people to actually do their due diligence and actually try to catch the fraud, because it actually gives them a way to incentivize them to actually collect evidence and show the fraud. That is the most basic way. Also, with the disincentive of false reporting, it might actually result in less court clog. Because right now the court system is pretty slow. Honestly, I think we should expand the court system in a way so there's more judges, so it's actually faster. But doing stuff where there could actually be punishment for false reporting would also result in less court clog, because then there's going to be less cases that aren't false. So that is the best thing, in my opinion, that you could do. Provide some sort of incentive like that to end up reducing all this fraud and catching all of the negligence and fraud and waste that's going on in the government. So overall, that is the best system, I think, that could solve it. But what do you guys think? Do you think is there another way to actually incentivize judges and people in power to actually actually do their job and result in less fine? Is there another way to actually incentivize people reporting on the false fraud and reporting on the fraud and to incentivize less reporting of false allegations. So what do you guys think? Is there a better system? What could you guys think of? And if you do, tell me in the comments. Thanks everyone for watching. Share this with anyone you know, and I'll see you guys next time.